Today we are going to do my final mock draft for the 2026 entry draft, which is, and I'm going to clarify, different than the consensus drafts that I've been doing for the last few weeks. This is my own personal opinion based on everything I've read, watched. So here's what I would do if I was making a pick for each NHL team, assuming of course that there were no additional trades being made. At pick number 1 for the Toronto Maple Leafs, I have them taking, surprise, surprise, Gavin McKenna. There's just no world where I see the Maple Leafs passing up on him. He is just a different sort of prospect, the kind that you absolutely just have to take if you're in this position. An elite skater, high motor, incredibly competitive. With him and Austin Matthews as your core going forward, the Leafs are going to be perennial contenders. At pick number 2, I have the Sharks also going with the chalk pick in Ivar Stenberg. I know that they desperately need help on defense, but Stenberg is just too good of a prospect to pass up on at number 2 overall. My position is always, when you're picking at the top of the draft, go best player available regardless of position. You can always trade assets to get and fill needs later on, and that's what I would do if I was the Sharks with Stenberg. Take the best player available in this slot, a player who honestly projects out better than the guy you took last year at number 2 overall, Michael Misa. You can always trade a guy like Eklund or Will Smith or even Chernyshov to try and get help on the back end, but take the best player available. With him and Celebrini as a duo in your lineup, you're going to be a monster in the West. At pick number 3 for the Canucks, as much as I know that there's the personal connection between Manny Malhotra and his son Caleb, I just don't see a world where they can pass up on the best defenseman in this draft, which is Chase Reed. He's just in a completely different tier than all the other defensemen in this 2026 class. And like I said with the Sharks, you at this spot just have to take the best player available. The Canucks need everything in their prospect pool, and building around an elite young defenseman like Chase Reed is a good first start. Now at pick number 4, which when I first recorded this was owned by the Chicago Blackhawks before they stupidly traded it away for Bowen Byram plus other picks and players, I had them taking Carson Karls, but now it's owned by the Buffalo Sabres, and I am pretty sure they're going to try and package this pick to make a move for an actual roster player, but assuming that they're not able to and they make the pick at number 4, I have them also taking Karls. He's just the second best defenseman in this class, and there's a pretty big gap between Karls and the other defenders in this draft. I think that they've maybe soured a little bit on Radim Murka. He could be a trade chip for them. Karls would just be a better version of that. And hey, Buffalo's also pretty loaded up on defense right now, so they don't need to rush him at all. They can take their time, let him develop into maybe a top pairing defenseman in the future. At pick number 5 for the New York Rangers, I have them taking another defenseman. This time, the German Hulk Albert Schmitz, a guy who is incredibly raw and definitely needs some time to develop, which makes sense for the New York Rangers, who are on a rebuilding timeline, even if they don't want to admit it themselves. But if he hits his potential, he could be the best defenseman in his class. He's just a bit more risky than the other guys who are going to be available and taken before him. At number 6, I have the Calgary Flames grabbing another defenseman. There's a lot of really good ones in this class, and they're taking one that I really loved early on in my evaluation process, that being Keaton Vierhoff out of North Dakota. I think he could be the perfect complement to Zane Parekh. He's a little bit more stay-at-home than Parekh is, and if you have those two in your top 4, you really probably only need one more really good defenseman, and your blue line is basically set. And like I said, there's just not a lot of very good forwards here that I would take above Keaton Vierhoff right here. At pick number 7, I have the Kraken closing out kind of the second tier of players after that big top 3 of defensemen, taking Daxton Rudolph here. A big, very smart player with a good shot. I think he could be not only just a solid contributor for the Kraken, but a dynamic player to add into their lineup that desperately needs some identity. I just love the combination of vision and size he brings, and if he develops those physical tools a little bit more, he could be an incredibly dynamic player for them. Moving on to the Jets at pick number 8, we're moving into the third tier of players, and these are going to be mostly forwards, and we start off with a guy who is going to be a lot higher on my board than everybody else's, and that's Nikita Klepov. And I know the big knock on him from everybody is size, but we just saw what Carolina did with a smaller group up front, and Klepov is not really that small. He's 6 foot, 180 pounds. He can add weight to his frame, but he just brings very, very good puck skills, and he's been incredibly productive in the OHL. And I think for the Jets, who have a pretty solid lineup right now and can afford to take a big swing here, take a swing on the guy who I think could turn out to be the third best forward in this entire class. Now, pick number 9, we have the San Jose Sharks, who traded William Eklund and some other prospects to get this pick. And I wasn't a big fan of this trade precisely for the reason that there's not really a good defenseman in this spot that's going to be available for them to take. I know a lot of people, when they made this trade, were thinking, well, this could be a spot where you grab a Verhoff or a Rudolph. But in all of my consolidated boards and mock drafts, I just don't see a real world where one of those defensemen falls all the way to number 9. And in this spot, even though I would love for the Sharks to take a defenseman here, the gap between Caleb Malhotra and the next best defenseman on my list is just too big to justify. So I hope the Sharks either make another move to move up a spot or two and to a spot where they can secure a defenseman, or trade some of their young forwards, or this pick to get a defenseman who can play for them this year, because I just don't think in the 9th spot they're going to be able to get one of the second tier of defensemen in this draft. Unfortunately, I just think they're going to be all gone by the time that they're picking. Rounding out the top 10, if I am GM Chris McFarland for the Nashville Predators, I am taking Ethan Belchetz, the hulking forward out of Windsor. I know that I just said that Carolina won with a lot of smaller, faster forwards, but man, Belchetz is just such a huge prospect, and if you can get him to be even an average skater, and again, Nashville is in kind of that same position as Winnipeg, where they don't really need to add a top 6 forward right now. They can take a guy who's a little bit of more of a projection and wait for him to develop. At pick number 11, the Blues take the last player in this 3rd tier that I have here, and that's Viggo Bjork. A very slick playmaker who is, of course, held back by his lack of size at only 5'9". But what he lacks for in size, he makes up for with just a ton of puck skills. I really like Bjork. I think he's going to be a really good NHLer. And now after the Blues have traded away Jordan Kyrou, Bjork would be a guy who you could add to a top 6 probably within a year or two. Now I'm going to go way off the board here with pick number 12 for the New Jersey Devils and take Tommy Bly out of another smaller guy at only 5'11", 165, but incredibly smart and good at transition game. And a guy who took a huge jump last year in the QMJHL, but a guy whose upside I love. He could be your Shane Gostisbehere for New Jersey. At pick number 13 for the Islanders, we'll go with a guy who's dropped down a bit from where the consensus board has him, Tynan Lawrence. I think he's going to be a perfectly fine player. I just don't think there's much special about him. He's one of those classic, high floor, low ceiling guys. His player comp is flipped to no. Just in this tier of players outside the top 11, I feel like you're either going to try and take a guy with a massive ceiling or just a high floor, and Lawrence is definitely the latter. Pick number 14 for the Columbus Blue Jackets, I have them going with J.P. Hurlburt. Again, we're kind of swinging back more towards the high ceiling guy. His shot is really good, and he's great when he has the puck on his stick. He just needs to improve his skating a little bit and his compete level. But again, for where we are in the draft, the Blue Jackets should just take a guy who, if he hits, could be a great running mate for Adam Fantilli. At pick number 15 for the Blues' second pick, we had them take one forward. Now we have them taking a defenseman in Ryan Lynn out of Vancouver. Again, a guy with some physical limitations at only 5'11", 178, but he has a great mind for the game, very smart, needs to add a little size, but can be a top 4 contributor if he reaches his ceiling. At pick number 16, the St. Louis Blues, who got this pick in that Jordan Kyrou trade, are going to take Ilya Morozov. Ilya Morozov fits that to a T, 6'3", 200. He's not the best player in terms of his on-ice skills, but he's a hard worker. He's going to be a bottom sixer for years to come. Again, one of those low floor, low ceiling kind of guys. And then at pick number 17, the Kings are going to do the exact same thing. Take a guy in Oliver Savanto who's big at 6'2" 3/4, 207. Again, a little bit lower end in terms of his skill, but he can play the tough minutes in your middle 6. And right after that, the Washington Capitals will pick another even bigger center in Brooks Rogowski, 6'7", 235, a little bit less skilled than Morozov, but just a massive man in the middle. I know that they would want to add another big defenseman, but you're in this tier right now where there's just a lot of really good forwards. At pick number 19 to the Mammoth, I have them also going with a center in Maddox Dejanay. Another guy who is big, but a little bit more skilled than guys like Rogowski, Suvanto, and Morozov. The difference between him and those other guys is that he's not quite as physical, but I think that's kind of what the Mammoth are going for, a little bit of a faster group, and he adds some size to that. I think down the line he'll project to be your replacement for Barrett Hayton, but better. Now outside the top 20 with the Sabres, we're getting a lot more gooey in terms of who you could take here. You could pick a little bit more for need if you're a team in this range, and a lot of these guys could be interchangeable. I'm just going to go in the order I have players, and we're going to start with Ryan Rubrick, a guy with all the tools in the world. He could be a home run hit at this spot. But even if he busts or he needs more time to develop, the Sabres have such a good young core. They can afford to take this swing in this number 20 slot. But if he hits, man, he could look like a great player. He's got a great shot. At pick 21, I have the Flyers taking a guy who I know a lot of people have been screaming, when is he going to get picked? And Wyatt Cullen. A lot of people have him very high. I don't have him quite as big because he isn't a great scorer. He doesn't have great production, but he has a great compete level. And I know that a guy like Rick Tocchet will fall in love with him. I just get a little bit worried because he's not a guy who's incredibly physical and doesn't have a great shot. So I don't really know what role he fits, but the Flyers could easily make him into a good middle six winger. At pick 22, I have the Penguins taking kind of the opposite, which makes sense given who is drafting in Kyle Dubas. Adam Novotny is a great skater, great shooter, not very physical, and a little bit unreliable without the puck. But again, he's one of those guys who has an incredibly high ceiling that the Penguins would love to add. At pick 23 to the Boston Bruins, I have them taking the better of the Ruck twins in Liam. For a Bruins team that just needs scoring so desperately, he has great puck skills and a great shot. Again, a guy who I think has a higher floor than most people give him credit for, but if he hits that ceiling and improves his skating, man, him and James Higgins on a line together could be dangerous. At number 24 for the Canucks, they ate their veggies and took Chase Reed at pick number 3. Now they get to have the dessert in Igor Shilov, a guy with one hell of a ceiling. He's got some problems in regards to his compete level, but my God, when he has the puck on his stick, he's incredibly skilled. Again, a guy who, at this point, you're taking a big swing, and if you hit, it's going to be a home run, and if not, he's going to bust out. And I have the Kraken doing the exact same thing here at pick number 25. I have them taking Elton Hermanson out of Modo, a guy who has elite tools, but he's not quite the best when it comes to hockey sense and compete level. But the Kraken just desperately need some skill in their lineup, and they couldn't get it at pick number 7, so they're going to take it here at pick number 25. And for the Rangers, who took a defenseman early on and have some good young defensemen in their lineup, I think they're going to go forward here at pick number 26. I have them taking Oscar Hemming out of Boston College. Another high floor, low ceiling kind of guy, does the dirty work, will be incredibly tough to play against. I just don't think he's an elite playmaker, but you're kind of not getting that at this spot unless you're taking a big risk. And I think for the Rangers, they'll probably just want to get another plug and play forward here. Then the San Jose Sharks, who kind of like the Canucks, had to take their veggies and take the best player available at number 2 in Stenberg, although those are some pretty good veggies. Now they get some candy, and they take one of my favorite defensemen in this entire class in Xavier Villeneuve. Another smaller defenseman, 5'11", 162 pounds, but he's just dynamic with the puck. Very smart, very good at the breakout. He could be, I don't want to say Lane Hudson and put that on him, but that's the style of play I saw when I looked at him. Is kind of like diet Lane Hudson. And if he could be even 60% of Lane Hudson, he's a great pick for the Sharks at the end of the first round. The Canadiens then at pick 28 take a guy who a lot of people would have higher in Juho Parinen, a guy who I just don't think has top 4 potential, but honestly, Montreal doesn't really need that. They have Hudson, they have Dobson. They really just need depth at the position, and Piparinen would be ideal for that. With the Blues at number 29, I have them taking the other Ruck twin, Marcus. I know I really wanted to take the two of them together, and I just love the skill that he brings. Again, all the same warts as his brother, but a little bit less productive, but I think he could still be a very solid NHLer. At pick number 30, I have the Flames taking a high ceiling swing on Marcus Nordmark, another guy whose his compete level maybe is a little bit of a question, but the tools are just so strong. If he puts it all together, he's going to be great for the Flames. If not, I think it's better to take the chance than just draft another guy who's going to be a middle sixer, which you already have 1,000 of those in your lineup so far. At pick number 31, the Champs are going to do exactly what they have done forever, which is find the best value available regardless of position. They'll take Malte Gustafsson out of Sweden. Big guy, mobile, can move the puck. Not incredibly elite in any of the skills, but I think he could still be a guy that they stash away, and if he develops into a top 4 defenseman, they'll count that as a win at the end of the first round. And then rounding out the first round, I have the Ottawa Senators taking Casey Mutrin out of the U.S. national team, a guy who just, again, big tools and a little bit of a higher floor than people give him credit for. Not the best playmaker, but I think he could be a guy that slots into your bottom 6 immediately if you needed him to. And for the Senators, who are, again, looking for some scoring help, if he develops, he could be a nice add to their lineup. So that is my top 32 mock draft for the 2026 season. Go ahead and drop in the comments how bad it was, but I'm excited to watch the draft unfold this Friday.